All right, we are recording. Throw up my screen. Comenzamos. Again, happy Friday. The World Wide Web. 2 summaries left. Again, you guys have been doing a great job on these. Keep it up. You're almost there. What's our year?
1990.
Yeah, 1990. Still, when I first started teaching a lot of this, I actually had kids who were born in that year, but now you guys are babies, so still haven't gotten there yet. See, we'll have a COVID-19 event probably not too long. I'll have to add that to it, get us up to date. All right, so there we go. Remember to tell a story, connect your ideas, connect your paragraphs. We've got the birth of the internet. We'll talk about in the first paragraph. We're going to talk about in the second paragraph how the internet has transformed society and the world. And then we'll be talking about kind of the dark side of the web, some of the unintended consequences of being so globally connected and digitally connected. And of course, we are experiencing right at this moment one of the great transformative blessings of the internet as we teach. So very relevant. And I actually have this really cool documentary that I usually show in class. I could not find a way to send it out for this year. So maybe next year we'll watch it, but it's really, really neat about the internet. So let's talk about the birth of the internet. How was the internet born? Or we'll say conceived, maybe before it was born.
They would use it after nuclear war attacks and stuff to communicate.
Yep. So it is a product of the Cold War and the space race. You know what we were talking about last week. The 1960s, don't have internet in the 1960s, but the development starts in the 1960s. And yes, they were being prepared for MAD, that if there was a mutually assured destruction, a nuclear war, then somebody's keys are really loud as you're typing. Maybe you can move your mic or mute. They said if the nuclear weapon destroys our normal forms of communication, how can we actually continue to talk to each other and share information? And so it was conceived, hey, can we somehow hook computers up to each other so that we can share information across distances, especially like maybe underground if a nuclear attack happens. So it was their ability to communicate after a nuclear strike that people began to investigate this idea of networking or connecting networks of computers together. And so then that begins a couple decades of development of this idea of now computers are invented around the 1940s and slowly developing, but then they, again, how can we get these computers to share information? This is also like basic for us now. We're like, oh, that's easy. You plug them in, you hook them up. But maybe you even had some difficulties before trying to get, your phone to talk to your laptop or your iPad to talk to your TV or something. Networking is difficult, but that was the idea. Is we wanted, first of all, it was just the military. Let's hook up some of our military computers. Then they began to kind of say, okay, so now New York has a network of computers, and Washington D.C. has a network of computers, and London has a network of computers. And so they began to say, well, what if we could connect the networks? What if I can take the network that's in Germany and connect it to the network that's in London and connect it to the network that's in Los Angeles, etc. And so then they find a way to connect those things with that TCP protocol. And so that's where we get this idea of internet, because what does that word internet means? You're actually connecting a bunch of different networks. And so that's when you say the word internet, that's what you're talking about. First of all, it would be like all the computers at our school being able to, like through cables, hook up to each other. That was the first development. And then now our network of computers can talk to another network of computers somewhere. And so the internet actually exists in a bunch of different hubs all around the world. The internet is a physical thing. It's a bunch of servers in different parts of the world that hook up a bunch of computers that then also connect with each other. You could try to destroy the internet. It is a physical place. And so then, whoops, Morning in America. That was from my last, I forgot to delete that. And then that takes us to 1990. Why do we say 1990 is kind of the birth of the internet?
Oh, because
His first message was sent between.
Yeah, the first message was sent, kind of like that famous phone call between Alexander Graham Bell. But where was it sent?
from UCLA to Stanford.
Yeah, UCLA to Stanford. They send the first message again between networks. What happened as they were sending the message?
Well, like, I think it was like code or something like that, but then like two of the letters kind of shaved off for some reason.
Well, yeah, it crashed. They only got like the first word or the first couple letters, and it crashed. But they said it's possible, and so then they began to make it more robust so that it wouldn't crash. But it's kind of like the very first text message, basically. Then so that really begins our launching point of the internet. And then what allows people, like common people, to be able to start using the internet? What do people need in order to gain access to it? Two things. One's software, one's hardware.
A computer?
Okay, you need a computer, but what did computers used to have to hook up to? Anybody know? Or what it said in the video?
Oh,
A
router.
telephone.
Telephone. So before there was a router, you had to use your phone line. The way in which they began to make the internet more reliable was that people could connect through your phone line. So like when I grew up, when this was first happening, again, I was born in '83, I was going to school in the '90s, you would unplug your phone and you'd plug it into the side of your computer, and then you would have to dial something, and it would sound like a phone call, beep, 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 and it would, phones don't even sound like that anymore. And then if you were on the internet, your mom would be like yelling at you, like, get off the internet, I got to make a phone call. There's no cell phones or anything. And so you'd have to unplug. And so it was, obviously it seems horrible compared to what we have now, but so that you needed to actually connect to your phone line, to your computer. And then the other thing is you needed a, what we would call, Safari, Microsoft, there comes Ziva, Chrome. You needed a what? What are those things?
Browsers.
Browsers. And again, we take it for granted because we're like, oh, I open the browser and I see the internet. But what that means is you needed software that could take the information that was on the internet and display it to people in such a way that they could see it, and they could search, and they could like put in web addresses like the URL at the top of a website browser. Before it was just much more archaic, and the information was out there being shared, but how would you actually tap in and look at it? And so the other key achievement, along with doing it over the phone line, was internet browsers. Early ones were AOL, America Online, was one of the most widespread ones, or another one was called Netscape. I think the video goes over a couple others, but that was groundbreaking at the time. And there's a reason, Google is one of the leading tech giants currently, is because Google was the one who, the first thing Google did. Oh, that's a nice recording. Getting an echo. Someone's got an echo playing back through the line. But what was Google first before it was, Docs and Google Classroom and all this other stuff?
It was a browser?
Yeah, it was a browser. It was ability to search the internet and actually find stuff. Again, we take that for granted. We like, oh, I just searched for it. Well, that was people didn't first understand that process. But once people could gain access to the internet physically through the phone line and then through browsers and actually be able to look things up and input websites, then it became something that, average people and now children and babies can do. So there we have the birth of the internet, 1960s to 1990. So let's talk about transformation, unless there's some questions. Hey, Ziva, sorry I kicked you off. I didn't know who Miss Sarmiento was. Transformation. What is the internet basically providing people?
A bunch of information. Information. So first of all, the reason the internet is transformative is at its basic core is it is an information explosion. It gives people access to information. Whether that's, again, you might think of looking up facts, but it's also what we're doing. We are sharing information. We're able to teach and communicate online at a distance, which is not as fun as having you guys in class, because we're able to share the information of our relationship. Social networking, text messages, TikTok, all that. That might seem like fun and not like Wikipedia or something,
but that still is just information that's being shared. And so the real, benefit or miracle or blessing of the internet, the World Wide Web, is that you're able to now share information and just, what that www stands for, across the whole world, and almost like instantaneous, at a moment, at a click, to the fact that we're spoiled. We're just like, now we don't even want to get on our computers anymore. How can we can just sit there and go, hey, Alexa, Echo, tell me how many people are in the world, or what's the answer? Some of you little beasts are tempted to take a picture of your math problems and let the internet solve them for you. It's just this incredible explosion of information around the world in all sorts of social forms, bank accounts, whatever. Everything can be done online, and that's. I mean, when I try to, and we'll get to this in the conclusion, when I try to emphasize how radical and revolutionary the printing press was, we're living in that moment now. That's why it feels like the world's different every 2 or 3 years. I was just watching some videos from like 2014, 6 years ago, and I'm like, man, that looks like outdated. That's because we live in a world where now information can change and grow and be shared and built upon so quickly that we just expect things to keep getting better and better and changing on and on. The world wasn't always like that. That is a direct result of the ability to share information, and in particular the internet. So that's why I make sure we do spend a week on this in history, because it's completely changing our world, and it's the world you guys are growing up in. Let's see. The other, kind of specifically, again, as type of this information is then social networking. The ability of people to connect with each other across the globe. Again, but we're doing an example of teaching, just the ease of communication. I remember growing up, my dad would go on these hikes, and he'd go off and hike all day, and then he'd have to find a payphone to call my mom. And if she wasn't sitting by a phone, locked in a certain place, like, attached to it, in her house, then he wouldn't know where, she wouldn't know where he was, and for her to go pick him up, and all, coordinating people's schedules used to be incredibly more complicated. Now, we're just constantly texting. We're constantly socially networking. We're constantly updating. You can track each other's locations on your phone. So, I can tell, Ziva's here. She checked in at this location. Oh, they're over there. And I can, we can, find each other and communicate with each other in such a way as human beings that too is a specific way in which our world is really, really changing. Facebook was obviously the beginning of that. Facebook and YouTube were kind of the beginnings, and it just takes on, and then you got Twitter, and then you got Snapchat, now you got TikTok, and all these other ways of socializing. And now Zoom has now entered the vernacular, where now everyone, I'm Zooming today, and I'm Zooming tomorrow, and whatever. A way in which human beings can interact and talk and chat, sharing information, but there's definitely a way in which it's changing our human interactions. I know Jaden or other people talk about, I have a friend over in, South Dakota, and we share art, or and you're able to connect to people in a way that, again, was never possible in all of human history. And we're only now experiencing some of the benefits, and we'll talk about in the third point, some of the negative sides of that. So social networking is really changing our lives and our culture. And then the third piece of this is just the economy. And you kind of answered some questions on this idea of a global economy, in which, again, now you not only trade with your neighbors, you not only trade within your country, but you can trade anywhere on Earth. You can have a little internet business, and you can ship things around the world. You can have, this incredible beast of a company called Amazon. And that the Amazon just reaches around the world, because we now live because of the internet, we live in this global economy. What do you call what do we call it when people around the world are able to trade with each other?
Free trade zone.
Yeah, this idea of you can call them both open markets and free trade. That for a lot of times throughout history, countries and monarchs and governments controlled who you can trade with, but because of the internet and current situation, we live in an era of free trade in which people can trade. Companies now have headquarters not just in America, but you have companies like Samsung and Toyota and whatever, the WeChat, You know, a lot of these Chinese companies that are now, they're not even like a national company, they're multinational companies, because now they're able to have all these open markets where you can sell around the world. And that's, as a whole, that's really brought a lot of prosperity, because if you have a business, you want to have as many customers as possible. You know, and you could say, well, my business can only get so big in a place like Arroyo Grande. There's not that many people here. Well, if you have the ability to ship your things around the world, you can run a business out of your home, and yet you could potentially be reaching the entire world and growing in prosperity. And a general principle is the more people freely trade with each other, the richer everybody gets. Are people, why do trades make everybody rich? Why does trading make people more prosperous?
Like,
Think about the nature of a trade. What are you doing when you trade with somebody?
giving something you don't want for something you do.
Yeah, or at least something you want more, right?
Yeah.
Does anybody lose when you trade?
No.
Not if it's a free trade, right? It's not like you're a big brother and
No,
you're forcing
no.
them to give you something, your little brother to give you something, or you'll beat them up. Yeah, if it's a free trade, then you're exchanging something that's of lesser value to you to somebody who it's more value to them, and you both come out of it happier. That's just a really kind of basic idea, but that's what, and all business is a trade. Sometimes it's money for the other thing, for the product. Most of the time it is now. But both sides are getting what they needed and getting rid of something that wasn't as valuable to them. And so the net value, the net prosperity, the net whatever, satisfaction, happiness, needs of the world in the last couple of decades, poverty rates around the world have gone down significantly. And it's the result of free trade, and free trade on a level at which would not be possible without the internet, without the technology to help us, communicate and run these types of businesses. So it's really an incredible blessing. It's opened up, and again, one of the sad things about now, our economy is struggling at the moment because of the shutdowns. But what people are looking at is not only Americans who are losing jobs, but you've got people in Bangladesh who are going hungry. You've got people in Cambodia who are going hungry because they're the ones actually making a lot of the stuff that gets sold and we buy here. And because we're all kind of interconnected. And when that's not shut down, that's actually a really wonderful thing, because you've got, again, people around the world doing better because they're able to trade and access markets all over the planet. Another key thing in way it's transforming the economy, we've already kind of referenced, but how many of you have parents that work at home? I mean, maybe right now, everybody, but the whole idea, if you remember when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, what that really did to society was it pulled everybody out of their houses. We talked about it ending the cottage industries. Now you had to go to the factories, you had to go to work, you had to commute to work. Technology, the internet's reversing that. And that now more and more, you can do more with less, and you can work from home, and all you need is the internet. It's like, that's what people ask. Can you do your homework? Can you do this? Well, as long as I have the internet and a computer, yeah, I'm good. I can do anything. Give me my phone and I'll get everything done. That's the, again, not necessarily the miracle, but yeah, that's in a way the miracle or the transformative power of the internet. Because we're able to do a lot more with a lot less. And in some ways, I'd say cottage industries in a way are kind of returning, because now all of a sudden you can run businesses from home, or you can be a salesman around the world or around the country, but be able to, for at least a lot of the time, just stay home and work locally. So it's pretty powerful when you start to look at how much, and try to appreciate it, because again, you just know the life you've lived, but how much it has changed the world. And I think, like the printing press, when you back up and you look at, wow, what happened in the history of world history, they'll look at the internet as like, that changed everything, and it's still changing everything. Any questions before we do the last point?
This was kind of earlier, but what does TCP stand for again?
I think Transmission Control Protocol. Let me double check that. Yeah, Transmission Control Protocol. All that means is, and we weren't able to get into it because I wasn't able to show you the video that I wanted, and they mentioned it briefly in the ones I sent you. But that's just what allowed computers to talk to each other. transmission control protocol was what they developed when they were early time making networks. And yeah, this is going back to point number one, that allowed computers to share information and pass them back and forth. That's why if you've ever actually looked at like connecting to the internet, it'll say like TCP IP, and that's your transmission control protocol, internet protocol address. And again, it's getting kind of wonky and you don't have to get into that, but that's what allows your device to talk to the internet. And that's something they had to develop when they were coming up with this whole idea of networks and how do we get one machine to be able to share information with another machine.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, won't have to go beyond more than that. Any others? Okay, so then obviously, if you remember, we talked about the Industrial Revolution is, again, a great parallel to what we're talking about, because remember, we said all this, really the Industrial Revolution was a blessing to the world. It created the middle class, it lifted people out of poverty, it allowed people to have more leisure time, all these sorts of things. But if we remember, it also brought in side effects like pollution, child labor, unhealthy working conditions. Sometimes there was worker exploitation. And so there were like these unintended side effects to this technological change, which was the steam engine. That's the same thing here, that as we look at, the amazing things that technology and our phones and our, my wireless earbud and all these things bring to our lives, there are these unintended consequences to the technology. And that one video, the last video, I think that was part of the slide deck, I think really drives that point home. I don't know if you guys enjoyed that, but it really kind of shows we've got this technology, we've got this connectivity, but we've got to be careful about what that's going to do to us as human beings. And just like they suddenly realized, hey, kids used to help mom at home, maybe it's not such a good idea that they just naturally go work, in the factories. Or wow, yeah, farmers are used to working from sun up to sundown, but maybe these people in the factories shouldn't have to work 18-hour days. There were changes. And so now we're on the internet, and I've kind of identified 4 categories to address, which is, what's narcissism?
Is it like going against what you say? Like you say something and then you don't do it yourself?
No, that'd be like hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Narcissism is a self-obsession. Self-obsession. It comes from a Greek story of Narcissus, who couldn't stop looking at her reflection in the water. So it's like vanity or self-obsession, and that with the social media, you have a whole psychological development among people, especially young people, but it hits everybody, that the way they see themselves, like how they see themselves, is how their profile is online, how their social media is perceived, the number of likes that they have, digitally modifying their faces and their appearances, all these different things that it's kind of made, or even just the idea that, I need to text people, and I need to if I don't socialize online, then I'm not really having real relationships. And so it's this kind of just, again, what's my Instagram look like? Oh, what's my TikTok? Who's got the coolest TikTok? That the technology can kind of create this self-obsession that I don't know if you guys can relate to, or if that rings true to you, but you can get really caught up in the digital world that we have to remember isn't really the real world. And we almost forget who we are as physical human beings and what really matters, versus, hey, that's a great filter, I look good on that, or nobody liked my post, I guess I don't have any friends. I'll run into that. I'm preaching my church sermons on live stream, and I'll sit there and I'll enjoy the sermon, but then I'll look and I'll say, well, how many likes did it get, or how many views were there? And I'll start to judge myself and my own value based on what's happening with the social networking. And that's it's shown that people who use more social networking have higher rates of depression, because they're looking for validation in how they appear or the life they live online versus the real physical life that everybody was living just 30 years ago. So that's a radical change in how human beings kind of see themselves. The other one is isolation. That with the internet, rates of loneliness have skyrocketed among people. It's kind of funny talking about that during the lockdown, but even when there's no lockdown, again, you'd sit there and you'd watch people during the lunches here at school, and it's time to socialize, and everybody's sitting around a table on their phones. You know, and I know people definitely do. So, hey, look at this video and look at this thing. But technology, in a way, can be very isolating, because now I don't have to talk to people. I don't have to go meet real people. I can have all my relationships online. I can watch, YouTube and Netflix and whatever till my eyes bleed. I can have all this information. I don't need other people, or at least it's harder to find other people. Again, it used to blow my mind as this was getting popular. I'd go out with people and everyone would just have headphones in, and they're all in a group, but they've all, or even they'd be talking, but in one ear, they've got something playing. And again, it can, because you have access to this digital world, you can find yourself actually isolated from real physical meaningful relationships. I'm gonna, even if it's just like I've grown up and left my house, but I'm like I'm just gonna text my mom. Why would I call her? Or why would I even go see my mom? I can just video chat her, and it's great. It's a pretty cool technology, but even doing this is not the same as if we were in the same room together, able to physically interact. And so there's something isolating about technology that we need to be mindful of. It's kind of scary. I'll go home and each of my kids will be on their own Chromebook doing their own work, and there's just nobody talking and there's nobody interacting. They're just in their own little worlds. And we have to be aware that in some ways could potentially have some real damaging effects on relationships and people and their ability to even like deal with each other. When, it's like, well, why deal with that person who has all these emotions and has all these wants, and, they're high maintenance. I'll just talk to my computer. I'll just watch videos. I don't need real people. They're too much trouble. All the introverts say, amen. Then you have censorship. That as amazing as all this new information is, you have to realize when you type in Google and you say, I'm going to Google a question, Google is controlling what you see. And I'm not saying that they're heavily censoring it, but actually the evidence is coming out. They do censor it. Right now, anybody who's questioning a lot of the COVID-19 stuff are getting blocked on places like Facebook and Google, and it is controlling what people can actually see. If you go to places like China, you have the internet, but you cannot get on Facebook. You cannot get the same Google results in China that you would get over here. And so as much as you feel like it's an illusion sometimes, you think, oh, the internet gives me access to all this stuff. Well, actually, you're only seeing what whoever your internet provider and whatever your browser are, and even maybe whatever government has put in place is allowing you to see. And so our ability to control what people see and censor what people learn and know is also at risk. That if the internet isn't kept free and we're not aware of how what we're seeing is being, controlled, it's kind of like you might have somebody who's a Republican versus a Democrat. Well, your computer learns that, and all of your YouTube feeds are different. They're tailored just to you. Oh, they've watched this, Justin's always watching motorcycle videos, and so they're throwing up all these motorcycle videos, and someone else is watching cat videos, and somebody else is watching political videos, and somebody else is watching anime, and so you're only getting the information that the people think you want to see, and so it's important because you think, oh, I'm getting all the information. No, you're getting a selected, censored amount of information, and you're going to have to make an extra effort to get the full story. And so we kind of get this place where people are living in their own little censored bubbles. And in places like China, governments are actually heavily controlling what people can see. Another example of YouTube, we have transgenderism being debated in our country. And there was a doctor who had done a study and said, this transgender thing, especially for children, is really harmful. She made a video about it, put it on YouTube. YouTube took it down and said, that's hate. You can't say that. And this was a scientist, this was a doctor. And so again, the ability to censor and control what people see, we have to pay attention to that. And then finally, you can see the last thing, it's just bullying. That, if you've endured that, or if you've made the mistake of engaging in that, but when you bully somebody in person, you have to look them in the eye, you have to see how they respond, you have to actually deal with them. But when you send something as a text message, you post something electronically, you're able to attack people facelessly. You're able to attack them secretly. And so what we found is, the whole thing of cyberbullying is a new phenomena, because people tend to be a little more wicked, a little more foolish when they can do stuff, and nobody, and they can do it anonymously, but when you actually have to look somebody in the eye and tell them that, people tend to, at least, there are those bullies, but people tend to be a little more civil when they have to look people in the face. Or I don't know, and even a milder version is maybe you've sent somebody a text message. You ever had somebody get a text message and they completely misunderstand what you meant? Like you send something and the way they read it, they're like, what? Or they think you're mad, or they think whatever, they take it the wrong way. You're like, no, 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 no. And you send some emojis to try to clear it up, that sort of a thing. That's the other thing to remember, is just that this electronic communication, as great as it is not as rich as when you're physically with the person and able to say it. That's why I always tell people, if you have bad news or something negative to say, don't send a text. You need to at least make a phone call, or at least do it in person. And then of course you can take that all the way to intense bullying. And the most kind of intense form of bullying you can see, again, you've had people commit suicide over the types of bullying that people have done, posting pictures that they don't like online, spreading rumors about them. Or you even have you guys know what swatting is?
No.
Swatting is this thing where they use the internet to call 911 on a random neighbor, or sometimes an enemy. You know, like, I want to get back at Jack because he never comes live. I just have to look at that silly picture of him. And so I call the SWAT team on his house and say there's a hostage situation at his address. And then a bunch of armed men with guns show up at his house and potentially, maybe just cause a scare for his family, but they've also had innocent people accidentally get shot in these situations. And people can do that anonymously over the internet. And so just the temptation to abuse electronic communication is something else that is kind of a dark side of the internet. And so again, like with the Industrial Revolution, we need to pay attention to how the technology is changing us and say, wait a minute, do I really want to live this way? Do I really want to live a life where my ear is always getting something electronically plugged into it? Do I want when I go to dinner with my family, do I want all my kids on their own little devices staring at them, playing video games or watching the internet? Am I going to pacify my baby by giving her my phone all the time, or I'm going to teach her actually to have self-control? I think it's really powerful, that part in the video where it talks about that we literally get kind of high off hormones from notifications on our phone, checking our phone. I don't know if you've experienced that, but that video where it talks about when you see, like right now I have a text message icon and I'm kind of like, ooh, who's that? Who would that be? And literally my body is so conditioned to check on that. It sends pleasure hormones to my brain every time I grab my phone and I check it. And sometimes maybe you find yourself just kind of holding your phone or looking at it, even though you checked it 10 seconds ago. That is the power of this technology to completely rewire us. And we need to, they find that people actually have higher levels of anxiety depending on their battery level of their phone. Like when they have a low battery level, they actually start to sweat and get anxious and get irritable and get annoyed because they're so connected to it. So all kind of things pretty soon they're going to want to implant this stuff in your bodies. So it's just going to keep going, and it's useful to be mindful of, okay, where am I going to draw the line? Where am I living a better life because of the technology, or am I actually starting to live a worse life with worse relationships because of the technology? You've got another story. Gaming is, huge everywhere, but in South Korea, gaming's really huge. And they actually have to have passed laws where they have parents whose kids are starving and babies are dying because the parents become addicted to video games. And there's stories of these parents going to jail because they stopped taking care of their infant because they were so addicted to a virtual game that they were playing. So again, it's kind of it's a whole new world that we've got to learn to balance in a healthy way. All right, any questions for So What?
For censorship, would you call that also kind of like brainwashing, because they're controlling exactly what you see and taking away what they don't like and what they don't want to fill your head and stuff?
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a conditioning, and that's kind of what I meant by you get your own individual YouTube feed or your news feed, because it's like reinforcing what you already feel. And that's why, like right now with the virus, I'm like, turn the news off, like stop reading the news, or at least make sure you look at multiple sites, because you're just going to get the same potential like brainwashing or perspective sent to you over and over and over again. And if you're not aware that doesn't necessarily mean it's reality, then you've got to break from that and go, wait a minute, let me go look outside and talk to my neighbors. Is the world really ending? Like, is it really death if I go outside? And, yeah, exactly. That definitely includes, definitely includes brainwashing. What was that, Wyatt?
Like, all right, so there's this like channel that like stole like North Korean videos, and like you can see these little kids saying that like, well, respected Kim Jong-un and how that socialist is really well, but they don't really know about the outside world, and that's how contained they are.
Oh yeah. North Korea. When we get into high school, world history for high school, we watch a big old documentary on North Korea, because it's a whole nother level in North Korea. Like they only just found out a human being walked on the moon. And they think that, anyway, yeah, they're completely in the dark about information, because their information is completely censored. Most of them can't even get on the internet in North Korea. But same thing in China. I mean, like right now, China tried to tell everybody that the United States created COVID-19. And we're like, that's silly. But guess what? All the Chinese, the billion people in China, that's all they get when they look up COVID-19. They get the news from their government telling them that this is from the Americans. And so the internet allows them to control. In fact, even in China, everybody has to have a cell phone. Your cell phone is like your identity. And why? Because the government can track you wherever your cell phone goes. And right now, that they have a temperature app, and it takes your temperature. And if you don't seem to have a healthy temperature, then you can't go back to work. It's like the technology allows them to completely direct, you as a human being. So it's a wonderful tool. Technology is a wonderful tool, but watch out. It's something we need to pay attention to. It has a dark side.
Is that a totalitarianistic government?
Absolutely. Yeah. It is communist China. They are totalitarian. They allow people to own. It's not necessarily full communism, in that they've allowed some people to make some money, and that's why they're not falling apart like the Soviet Union did. They saw what happened to the Soviet Union and tried to fix that, but they are extremely totalitarian. Absolutely. When people, the doctors who first found out about this COVID-19 and they tried to warn them, they've all mysteriously disappeared. Several of them have died. When people were first sick with COVID-19, the way they handled it was they welded their doors shut and locked them in their houses. It's extreme. It's pretty intense. They're shutting down churches. We've had our fellowship. We had a couple that just went to start a new church there about a couple months ago. They've disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. We can't communicate with them. Well, we're not going to assume the worst, but it's not like the United States. It's not like the United States. And the technology is a huge thing that gives them incredible power. So what, again, first thing you'd want to emphasize, this is the power of the printing press. And maybe if you've never appreciated the printing press, just imagine how it's changed our lives. And that was what it was like in 1450, when all of a sudden people could get books and they could actually read books and they could print books, and books didn't cost a life's fortune. This is the second printing press that just allows information to be shared faster than ever before. The printing press did that when all of a sudden books became cheap and affordable, and you could stamp a message, a book over and over again, especially the Bible. But now that's what the internet represents for us. The other thing is, again, as Western civilization, the internet really represents the power of the individual. You guys can all become bloggers. You guys can all create a YouTube page. You guys can all get your ideas out for other people to see. And so it really empowers. It's kind of the opposite of narcissism. We can get a little self-obsessed with the internet, but it also makes all of us really, you can we had people here at this school, they've self-published their own books via the internet, so they're authors now because of the internet. It doesn't matter that they can't find somebody else to publish their book. They can do it themselves. So there's a huge aspect that I think is wonderful about the internet, that it really empowers individuals, even as I was describing, being able to run your business from your own home, or being able to live in California but sell things in New York or Beijing or somewhere else. It's really a powerful tool. And even as somebody like a government might try to suppress information, the reason we know what's actually kind of going on in China is because there are people who are able to work around the technology and send us real information. So we not only get information from the Chinese government, we're able to get information from individual Chinese citizens who are slowly sneaking information out via the internet so that we actually have a better idea of what's really going on. So even though it can be an oppressive tool and a narcissistic tool, it also can really lend expression to individual people and empower them. You know, one person taking a video of cops misbehaving, and it could be spread all over, and now all of a sudden the truth is out. And then we've already talked about it, but just it's a big so what is just remember there's unintended consequences. You know, unintended consequences. My 2-year-old, she's not even 2 yet, and she can talk to our little Echo thing, and that kind of, I'm like, and she can, you know, she can. It's amazing how this thing is. You want to be aware of how the technology is controlling us. And a piece of advice would be to make sure you do unplug and get away from it all. You know, spend an entire day without it. You know, I know some families like Sundays, or they make a whole day where their Sabbath rest is also a rest from technology, to kind of appreciate how much they're being changed by it. So we need to be aware of how much technology is having these unintended consequences on us. Keep a biblical approach to what we're doing, and just remember that this is not the real world. The real world's out there. Go play outside when we're done. This is not the real world. It's a tool, but we don't want to use it the wrong way. Okay. Appreciate you guys bothering to show up. Appreciate all the hard work you guys have done. I know it's kind of weird, not easy, but we're almost done.
Would you say one of the unintended consequences would be like if you post something on Instagram and you want likes, so you're just self-absorbing yourself into that you don't like go outside because you're just waiting for those likes to come in and those comments to like reply and just stuff like that? Would that be?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the narcissism aspect. Yeah. Or even the idea that you don't live in reality. Your reality is what's digital, and so you're not even investing. You're not even trying to become a better person. You're too busy trying to get the right selfie. You know, you're not making real deep friends that you can really share intimate relationship with. You're just trying to get those likes, or you're trying to get those views, or whatever it is. So definitely. Any other thoughts, questions? Anybody have any weekend plans?